Hi, I'm Nikki C. Wood, and along with my two partners, Mimi Toll and Nikki N. Wood, because there are two of us, we co-founded 270 Media, publishers of Marin Magazine, Local Getaways, and Spaces. We're excited to have you here at our virtual event, and we hope you enjoy it.
Hi, I'm Mimi Toll. I'm editor of Marin Magazine here in the Bay Area, and today we're talking with Sheila Shroeder of Wealthspire National Wealth Advisory. Based in New York City. She is actually based in the Bay Area, and she's an advocate for financial literacy. She has speaking engagements. She's an author and a champion for people to talk about money. She's also just finished her book and is now in the fun part of looking for a publisher. Welcome, Sheila.
Hi, Mimi. Great to see you.
Great to see you. Can you let me know what compelled you to write a book about finance? There's so many amazing books out there. There's podcasts, there's TV shows, and what sets your book apart?
The biggest difference, maybe the fundamental difference, is that my book is about how to have money conversations. Everybody, all these books talk about the 5 fundamentals, etc., or how to invest in real estate, just understanding all the fundamentals of finance, or even more deeper. But what none of them really cover is how to initiate the conversation, how to have the conversations with your partner, your parents, your siblings, the people who you need to have the conversations with.
That is so true. And if you think about conversations, like we all say different words and then we hear different words and then we have different, expectations, and, people come with loaded in their mind of like, this is what I want. And then how do I get it? And when you think about the way people come from different cultures and different religions, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of different ways that people have to approach talking about money. And could you give me some examples of maybe, different cultures and then maybe different religions? And
so that's such an important point, Mimi. Thank you for bringing that up. I've had so many people say, oh, I'm from the Midwest. Midwesterners don't talk about money. I'm from the East Coast. I'm English. English people don't talk about money. I'm Protestant. I'm Catholic.
right.
People with green hair don't talk about money. So culturally, many of us are raised where talking about money and politics is gauche.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they've been raised. They don't bring it up. The problem with that is that so many things have a financial tether, and so many things can happen in a negative fashion if we're not communicating how we are thinking about money to each other.
Actually, that's so just a personal thing. I was married blissfully almost for 25 years, maybe blissfully for 20. And I think money was the biggest thing that pulled us apart. Like my background, we didn't talk about money much. And I just assumed that things would be okay and taken care of. And it seemed like we were going in different directions. And I really wish that I had the tools back then to say, where are we going with this? And I mean, how would you suggest starting a conversation with your spouse, even if you've been married? So it almost seems like it's too long to start talking about it now. Like how would you get two people who really do love each other to get on the same page and make sure they're on the same path for their finances?
So I have a short answer and I have a long answer. The short answer, especially if someone else, you're in a couple, one of you is doing what we call the financial sort of housework, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's so true. In every family, someone does more cooking, someone does more laundry. And if they disappear, you can probably figure out how to cook and get the laundry done. But if the person who handles the finances disappears, then the other person really needs to know what's going on. It can be truly detrimental, and it can be a steep learning curve.
Mm-hmm.
So a wonderful first short answer would be to say, you've been doing the financial work for so long. I'd love to be part of that and take some of the load off you. And so it's acknowledging that the other person has been doing great work, but it's also
Mm-hmm.
saying, I'd like to be more engaged in this. And you might get pushback. You might have someone say, well, why are you suddenly interested? Don't you trust me?
Mm-hmm.
Or, I don't need help.
Or where's all the money? What's happening?
Right.
So we don't trust them, but we do. We're just curious.
Right. I'd like to better understand how it's working, even just for myself. And I can be more involved in the money conversation. And you might even say, most families have some, I don't want to say fight, but people do fight about money. Oh, I want to buy this car where you want to buy a different car, or you're budgeting for something and you're like, oh, what are you doing? If I could better, you could say, honey, we fought about this. Why don't we get together and help me better understand where you're coming from so that we can get on the same page? Could we start that discussion? I mean, how would that feel?
Well, it probably would have ended better. It probably would have been a nicer ending to why can't I spend money? What, it gets it's confusing, and then it gets emotional, and, and it's,
so that's my short answer. The longer answer is something we counsel all the time, which is money dates.
That's a
what
great
is a money
idea.
date, right?
Such a good
money
idea.
Date, I always say it involves food. People can talk about difficult subjects when their stomach is full. So
maybe one glass of wine, no more. Yeah.
But so money dates really do help, because you can have a structure. You can go into the money date saying, hey, let's go for coffee. Let's talk about these two subjects. Let's get and let's chat about them, and have a money date on a regular cadence. So you're covering things, once a month, maybe.
Right.
And you start to develop conversational skills around money that will help you move forward.
So since you are the expert, I will ask, maybe there's a new person in my life, and maybe we're starting to cohabitate and mix things. And how could I start a conversation and say, if we're going to be sharing the same house, it's sort of, to me, it gets confusing. And then I just go, oh, forget it. Just forget it. But it's really, instead of just saying, forget it, how do we start a conversation so we can start sharing responsibilities of money or know what to expect from each other? To me, that's an awkward conversation.
Well, you've just done a great job just now, right, of outlining. So think about if you said that to your partner, and you can say, gosh, we're planning on moving in together. How should we think about paying the utility bill together? Do you want to set up a joint account where we each put a certain amount of money into that so we can pay shared bills?
Yeah.
Now, when would be a good time to have this conversation? Or how would you like to think about it?
Yeah.
Or what worked for you in the past?
Yeah, and what didn't work for you in the past. So So, and speaking of family, I know there's really great ways to service families who have quite a bit of money, like family offices. Can you explain that to me, and how a wealth advisor could help a family out?
Yes. So family office is probably the fastest growing area of wealth advisory. And part of that is because we are seeing such a growth of wealth in many pockets, especially in big cities. And so some firms, their minimum can be 50 million, 100 million, 200 million. At Wealthspire, our family office starts at 20 million in investable assets. People will say, what is family office? Family office is really for families who are encountering greater complexity in their finances, and they need more bespoke attention. And so that can mean things like much more in-depth legacy planning, much more in-depth, the kind of conversations where we're speaking to their team, we're engaged with everyone on their team. When I talk about team, it means who are their attorneys, who are their tax people, who are their insurance providers, all these different people, and we help coordinate that conversation. It's a next level in terms of helping families manage their wealth, and it's just even more holistic.
Right. And so you're saying you'd be helping the parents as well as the kids. And, when kids come in, is there a way to talk about philanthropy that is a natural, because I see a lot of, kind of kids coming into the world, and then, they're going to all the big events, and you just wonder, okay, are they understanding the crux of what these foundations are doing? And, is there a way that you would suggest talking with families about how to carry on, legacies of what they believe in and what they love as opposed to, okay, every year you get to spend 10,000 in gala seats or which I see happen quite a bit.
So I'll say that the number one question I get asked is, how do I raise grounded children?
Thank you. That's what I was trying to say, but I was trying to dance around it because it is hard. You see some of the most successful parents have children that struggle, and a lot of it has money tied to it. And you think, gosh, maybe it was the fire hose of money that wasn't helpful,
It's so complicated. So here's my short answer.
Mm-hmm.
When people say to me, how do I raise grounded children with all this money? And not necessarily just theirs, our kids are surrounded by it, right?
Yeah.
My short answer is, if you're asking the question, you're probably going to be okay.
Yeah.
So that's the good news.
Mm-hmm.
But there are tools. I think philanthropy is a wonderful way to start to have money conversations. Like, for example, you might be uncomfortable having money conversations. So how can I help you do that?
Right.
Well, let's use philanthropy. And what I mean by that is, so for example, let's say you're really excited about the Marine Mammal Center. As
I am.
mariners,
My daughter was a volunteer. I love the
okay, so Marin Mammal
Yeah.
Center, they're an amazing organization. They do really cool things like seal releases.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you, mom and dad, have been donors to the Marine Mammal Center. You know everything about them. Maybe one of you sit on the board, and you definitely support them financially. And you are looking for a way to engage your kids and find, for example, when they're teenagers or even when they're little kids, how do you start to talk to them about money?
Mm-hmm.
Again, use philanthropy. You take your kids to the seal releases. You talk to them, you tour the new facility and you talk about, oh, we support them. Well, what does that mean?
Right.
We give them a certain amount. Right.
Mm-hmm.
We give them money every year to support the work that they do.
Yeah.
Oh, what does that mean? And start to have this conversation. Why is that important to you? Let's say your kids really care about climate change.
As they do these days. I mean, we all do, but.
Right. But wouldn't it be wonderful? So you can make that connection with your child's interest in climate change with the work Marine Mammal Center is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And why the support you're doing is also supporting something they're interested in. And then maybe you're starting to think, every year you get an allowance or something. You can put a percentage of it toward giving to a cause you care about. For our family, we've given a Marine Mammal Center. Do you want to give to that? Do you want to give to something else? Let's talk about why. Let's talk about what's meaningful. And you start to have this. Right.
That is so nice, and it's refreshing. I haven't thought about that way as much. My daughter was a volunteer there, and I always love it. But it's really nice if you go there and show them the building and say, "Yeah, this didn't just happen. This is because people in the community care and want this to exist for these animals because it's important." So I think there's actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to just keep asking the kid questions because,
sure.
What would you say? How do you advise your clients, or what would you point to when your kids are getting old enough to maybe buy a house or you have their own their next level? But I see two things. Sometimes I see people hold on to their money the entire time, and then it's like you say, oh, it's almost like you're waiting. The kids are waiting for them to pass on, so then they could have their life. Right. And then you see the next level. Sorry, this has become two questions of how do you help your child purchase a house and get into some financial security without making them later insecure by doing it for them.
Right. So in terms of those two questions, like what I would break that down into is, do I wait till later to give it to my kids, or should I help them sooner?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of feel like the answer is both. And what I'd like to tackle is the second question, which is your kids, you're in a position that you want to help your kids, or your kids have come to you and said, hey, mom and dad, could you help us out? We as a team often say, if you can give your kids money when they're young and they can use it to buy their first house, pay for their education, maybe start a business. And again, we're talking about what business, right? These are,
Yeah, you
and,
can go on like LoopNet and find these small businesses. It's like, this is what they love to do.
right,
Yeah.
right. And so help your kids when they're young, help them in a way that makes sense. If you're going to help them buy a house, help them buy a house they can afford.
So important.
And then that they can afford to maintain. They can afford the property taxes, the insurance, the overall maintenance. Don't necessarily buy a house that you want them to buy, but your kids can't afford to maintain. That's not going to serve them.
I mean,
right?
I feel like that type of education of, if you buy a house, this is what it's going to take for you to keep living in the house for 1 year,
Yes.
2 years, 3
Yes.
years.
It teaches the lesson of live within your means, right? So I think that's a really important, crucial lesson about money conversations and things we want to pass on to our kids. Live within your means. What does that mean?
Yeah.
That's a great way to talk to your kids about that. And then if you're going to leave them something later, help them understand why you're deciding to do it later. Maybe you're not in a position to give it to them now, and thus you need to leave it to them later. Or there's a reason, I just am, if you can have these open conversations, we're giving it to you later, and this is what we're thinking of giving you because we're also going to give it to this other philanthropy. Or you might say, we've signed a pledge that we're going to give the majority of our money away. And so we don't want you to expect too much. This is what we're going to give you.
See what I wish I had you around when my grandfather was still around, because our family was so uncomfortable talking about money. It was a surprise when none of it got left to anybody in the family. His second wife, it's an old story. It happens all the time. How would you suggest I might have approached him and said, hey, Gramps, what's going, I don't know if you work with your clients that intimately, but it's kind of awkward.
So, I mean, that's why I wrote the book, because if you're awkward having these conversations, the other person is going to be awkward receiving those questions. And what I get is your grandfather probably grew up in a time where people didn't talk about their money.
Right.
And it has had negative connotations or consequences. And so I would have said, hey, Gramps, my husband and I have just updated our will and our trust, or whatever the catalyst is. We're starting to give allowances to our kids. I'd love to talk to you about how you thought about that with mom and dad. And ask him a question about how he may have handled a situation in the past. Or you can say, I've updated my will and trust. How did you think about it? And he may still shut you down. But from experience, if you bring them up in ways where you're asking him to tell you a story and say, how did you think about philanthropy or not? If you don't give anything away, why not? You just don't believe in that or what? So find ways over time to instigate a conversation, and don't give up. You don't ever need to be pushy, but hey, Gramps, I need some help. I'd love your wisdom. Could you tell me how you thought about it?
Well, hearing you explain this, it's like, that's what I've been doing for a living for 30 years is talk to people and then keep asking the next question and the next question. It's not that hard when you just take away the money part. If you can just say, this is just a conversation, and it's enlightening, because it's good to know this. Even if it's a hard answer, you go, oh, well, now I know. And at least I heard it from him.
Right. And I think that's the most powerful thing too. The other thing I deeply believe, if you ask your Gramps and he shuts you down, at least you tried.
Yeah. And then he tells me in person instead of like, and I mean, this is way too personal, but I'm sure there was nothing really bad about it. He just moved on. He was doing his thing, and the rest of the family didn't know that. So it's just good to have.
We've seen families where someone inherited quite a bit and were upset about it. And they could be upset because they're like, wow, I didn't deserve this. Or, I'd give it all back if I could have 10 more minutes with my Gramps.
Right.
Or they grew up in such a frugal life, and then their parents just left them millions of dollars, and they're like, wow, we could have lived a little more comfortably.
We could have enjoyed that. Yeah, exactly.
And
that's actually an interesting, my in-laws and my grandfather had a very like kind of Depression era mentality. Do you notice through the decades that people have a different approach to how to spend money? I've heard that the millennials will spend more money and save less. I mean, is that something that you encounter and then you advise with, if somebody comes in and you say, well, maybe save, that might be a good idea, or
Well, so a lot of our conversations are about understanding what it is your money wants to do, what it is you want your money to do for you. So clients come in and they'll say, I've got X amount to invest. We can certainly invest your money. We find it is more powerful and effective if we understand what it is you want your money to do. And any financial advisor is going to ask, the first question is, when do you want this money to do X?
Yeah.
Is this money that you're investing for 20 years? Or is this money, for example, you've just had 2 children over the past couple of years and you've got college education. So a time horizon, or you're young, you've recently had a liquidity event of some sort, or you're starting to earn money and you think, I want to buy a house within 5 years. So depending on what the time frame is, we need to understand that so we can invest your money in a way and invest your portfolio in a way that it makes sense. So that's one of the most important questions is, what's the time horizon and what do you need it to do for you?
I love that. Yeah. What do you want your money to do? Like you're driving it. What's your message? What's your personal message?
Because we're helping you create a roadmap, a financial roadmap.
Yeah. And then how to keep it and how to get there.
Yes. And so, for example, you asked me about saving. Well, if we know what you're trying to do, what your goals are, and what your time horizon is, we can literally say to you, this is how much you need to be saving every year. Right.
And then you guys are managing all of the stocks and the ups and the downs, and
that's right.
And you're not having to do that. Yeah. So asking for a friend who hasn't had a financial advisor officially, are there different types of financial advisors, or is there, because my ex-husband did all the finances. It was amazing. And I constantly like text him and say, thank you for all those years. Can you still help me? He's like, no. But it's so helpful to have that kind of help. So I've looked into a bookkeeper, and then that got confusing. And then one tax person, then I realized, wait, maybe I should have it all under one umbrella. So what is the different types of financial advisors that somebody should be looking for?
So there are brokers. Yep. So there are brokers, for example, who buy stocks and bonds for you and create an investment portfolio. Sometimes, but not always, they do some financial planning, right? There are financial planners who just do financial planning. They do fee only. You pay them X amount to do a financial plan for you. You can pay them by the dollar, by the hour, or you can by the gig. So it might be X number for 5 hours, or they're going to charge you $5,000 for a comprehensive financial plan and you implement it. Then there are fiduciaries. Wealthspire is a fiduciary. That means we are legally bound to put our clients' interests before our own.
It's like a doctor of clients.
Yeah. We're also fee only. So fee only, fee-based, and commission are all different. So fee only means that if we're managing 2 million of your assets and we're charging you 1%, we are only charging you fee based on the assets under management. And
so you can have other,
right. And then you might want to know, well, so what do I get for that? So you want to ask, do you do financial planning? Do you do comprehensive, holistic financial planning? And you also give me investment advice and manage my portfolio? You want to ask that. We do. Then there's fee-based, where they may have a fee and then other commissions. And then there's commission only, for example.
And the commissions would be on buying or selling stocks or trades?
Well, pretty much buying and selling stocks is almost free at this point, but it may be, there are other ways. They might put you into a fund that has some sort of expense ratio. It costs you money to invest in that fund. So there are different ways that people get paid. And as a consumer, you want to ask, how do you get paid? What are you charging me? What does that feel like?
Yeah. Can I ask how did you get interested in finance? Like, it's a very specific
Right.
path.
Well, so I grew up in a family that talked about money. My mom was a florist, ran a flower shop, and my parents talked about money all the time. And and then my mother also, a big sort of lesson from her, my mother would say, every woman has to have her own money.
She's smart.
That was a lesson I learned. My dad used to say, pay yourself first. So that I learned from my dad, pay yourself first. From my mom, make sure you can take care of yourself financially.
Mm-hmm.
You don't ever have to depend on someone else. So that really resonated me. I spent my whole early career working on Wall Street, and it's interesting. I got laid off once. I was saving in my 401k, but I didn't have an emergency fund. I had to cash out my 401k so I could pay my bills. So here I was, a finance professional, but I didn't know a lot about personal finance.
Right.
And so after I retired from my Wall Street career, I was, friends had said to me, why don't you get in? You love working with, individuals. And I often think that working with individuals, I say, is like the philanthropic side of finance. The people who are financial advisors, who are working with individuals and their families, they do this because it's gratifying work. We make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm.
If all of us are financially empowered, I feel like we can live fuller lives. We can take care of the people we need to take care of.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I come to work every day.
Yeah. I mean, you're so right. If you think about like what stresses people out the most, it's not being in control of their finances, whether it's a big finance or small finance. It's
That's right.
It's a feeling of empowerment and being able to take care of yourself.
Right.
That's awesome. I've been learning a lot today, but what can you tell us about Wealthspire Advisors?
Again, I don't want it to be a commercial about what we do. I think it's really about, we care about the clients that we work with. And more than anything, I'd say what's unique to us is that we are really holistic. And so not only do we have certified financial planner, that's an industry designation, but we also have certified coaches who are also advisors. And it's not because we have a coaching practice, but it informs how we interact with our clients. We're trained in being able to ask uncomfortable questions. We can have comfortable money conversations, and hopefully you will receive them as being comfortable. So when we ask you something that maybe you've never thought about,
right?
Oh, do you have elderly parents you're supporting? And you're like, oh yeah, can I talk to you about that? Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And do people usually come to you like they haven't had a financial advisor, or they realize that they want everything under one roof? Because it sounds sort of unusual that you have everything under one roof.
Well, I think what they find out is, oh, this is what it can feel like to work with us.
Mm-hmm.
That's the big difference. There are so many great advisors out there,
mm-hmm.
right? I think what they find unique to us is what it feels like to work with us, the kind of questions we ask, how deep we go. And we're talking to you, we're talking to your family, and we really want to understand what it is you want your money to do for you. And then let's create a portfolio that does that.